Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the Reborn Football podcast. I'm Tans and I'm here with
Fuego.
and I believe this is episode 13.
Yep.
So as usual, we're gonna start with the with the verse of the episode. So I will let Fuego take us away.
Yeah. So today's verse or verses of the episode are 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 12 and 13. And they say, I'm reading King James, "For what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do not ye judge them that are within, but them that are without God judge it. Therefore put away from among yourselves that wicked person."
Okay, so I'm just gonna read that in ESV as well because I know not everyone does too great with the KJV. Personally, I'm one of those. So I'm just gonna read from the ESV version as well for anyone that might not understand first go. So verse 12, for what have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. Purge the evil person from among you. So I think this is a really important verse to look at as Christians. I think this is I think it's a stern verse. I think I really like the verse because a lot of the time in the Christian community, we're so focused on what people that aren't Christians are doing, scolding them, doing this, doing that, like, oh, why are you doing this? Oh, you're so unholy. Oh, you're so this, you're so that. When, people that call themselves Christians, us that call ourselves Christians, we're not perfect either. We're doing a lot of the things that we tend to, I don't know if castigate is the right word, but, a lot of things that we tend to look down on other people for. So I think it's really important to, as Christians, look upon ourselves first ourselves as individuals and then ourselves as communities, as our churches, to make sure that we're setting the right examples, that that we look like we have the light within us, that we have God within us. Because a lot of the time, the first Bible, and this is a quite cliche phrase, but the first Bible that someone's going to read is not a Bible that you show them, but it's going to be your actions.
Yeah.
It's going to be how you act. It's going to be, what did they see? This person says that they're a Christian. How did they act? You know what I'm saying? So I think it's really important to just, focus on ourselves, really look at ourselves first. I think there's a verse, really, really well-known verse. I think it's the one about the specks in the eyes.
Yeah.
The one about the specks in the eyes, take the speck out of your eye and then you can look to, I don't know, something.
I think it's it is basic paraphrasing is basically saying that you should not worry about the speck in somebody else's eye, but firstly remove the log in your own eye.
In your own eye. So I think that's a verse that really sums up, what we're going after here. Really focus on ourselves as the church, both as individuals and as a collective, before you start even worrying about people that aren't Christians and what they're doing.
Yeah. I would second that last bit where we talk about, basically just judge yourself before you judge others. You cannot be saying, oh, you're this, when you're doing the exact same thing. And obviously it's harder to see it when it's in your character and in the things that you're doing, but it's easier to point the finger at someone, especially when the person isn't saved like we are, like we claim to be saved, but sometimes we don't show it in our actions, we don't show it in the way that we live. I just want to take a bit from the amplified version in both verses basically. I might just read it again. So amplified version verse 12 says, "For what business is it of mine to judge outsiders, non-believers? Do you not judge those who are within the church to protect the church as the situation requires?" So I'm going to stop there. Basically, looking at it from a slightly different angle is that, look, God judges all of us, right? And one thing that we can do for ourselves as brothers and sisters in Christ is to correct each other when we see issues in our behavior. So God is going to judge, right? But if you see that your brother is doing something that he ought not to do, or there's an aspect of his life that he can be doing better, and you know that, and you can chastise him in love, that's what you're called to do first. As in, instead of looking at the unbeliever who's doing this, and that, you see your brother doing maybe something similar, you see yourself doing, like, you chastise yourself, you chastise your brother, and make sure that you protect them. You cover that thing that they are doing that they ought not to do, and sort it out between yourselves within the church. So we have no business with unbelievers in that regard. Now, it doesn't kind of take us away from our call to bring souls to Christ. That's a different kind of space. But I see that as a slightly different way to look at this. So then verse 13 goes on to say, God alone sits in judgment on those who are outside the faith. Remove the wicked one from among you, expel him from the church. So I see that as kind of going back to that point again, that if within the church you guys are helping each other by chastising each other in love, making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to each other, we're protecting each other from God's judgment, not allowing somebody to continue living in sin, basically. If somebody then decides to do that, then they are not a believer, they're an unbeliever, which means it says, like that last line says, remove the wicked one from among you, basically. But yeah, that's another way to kind of look at that verse.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And just to take from something that you said as well, and just to make a clear distinction as well, is that it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect or that you and your brother has to be perfect before you can preach the gospel. That's not what we're saying. That's a completely different thing. You can always preach the gospel even if God is still working in you to, change the negative things in your life. But don't judge people. That's a key distinction.
Yep.
Don't judge. You can preach the gospel. You can say this, you can say that, but don't judge others and don't look down upon others when you're still exhibiting the same behaviors.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's
Yeah, I think we'll take that. I think we'll clear that up for today.
yeah.
So I think we'll head into the football portion of the episode at the moment. And today we're gonna do something slightly different. We're gonna kind of veer away from constantly talking about the Premier League title race. We will touch on that at the end, I believe, but we just want to talk about kind of bring it back a bit towards our personal experiences with football. We haven't really talked about that in a while. I think the last time we really did that in detail was like the very first episode, which was like a long time ago. And then I think we've had one or two like episodes where we touched on similar topics in between. But I'd like to ask you, when did you start watching football, and what was your, how was the game back then when you started watching football?
I think the earliest kind of memories for me in terms of watching football, not necessarily following a team or being massively engrossed in it, but kind of watching football is probably like around the time I started kicking a ball myself, maybe 3 or 4 years old, where, it's just on the TV. You're not massively understanding what your parents or the uncles or whoever it is that are watching the football and are really engrossed in it are kind of seeing and all of that, but just feeling the atmosphere in the room when people are kind of like glued to the screen, the emotions that are running when their team scores or they win or they lose or whatever like that. And then kind of like growing up into my late, like before I was 10 basically, is when I kind of started getting really engrossed into football and feeling those emotions for myself. But I'm trying to think of what would have been the most notable thing that happened in my football childhood, if I want to call it that. It's hard to say, to be honest with you. I don't think much really happened for me pre World Cup 2010. That's probably my first strong memory of watching football and being really engrossed in what's going on. So yeah, that's where it kind of started for me, basically.
Yeah, it would be quite similar for me. For me, it's slightly after World Cup 2010. I have a very vague memory of World Cup 2010. I think I remember watching the final, maybe the highlights of the final, but like around that time. But my first memories of football, it's probably the reason I hate Man United so much. But my first memories of football like my first really vague, no, actually, no, it's not United. It was Chelsea. My first vague memory of football was losing 2-0 to Chelsea and Drogba scored. My second really vague memory of football was losing to Man United. And then my, like, probably the one where I could say the emotions were really there from the beginning was when Obafemi Martins scored that winner for Birmingham in the Carling Cup final. I cried my eyes out that day. I was 6 years old. I look back on it, I'm like 6 years old. I was already like that emotionally into it. I remember like I used to cry every time a team scored against Arsenal. So yeah, my dad probably put me on, but I don't know. Like, I think it might just have been me. You know what I'm saying?
I hear.
Like, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, like at that time, football was. I wasn't really into like looking at tactics and all that. I just watched the game. I just loved the game. You know, I try to play football whenever I can. I didn't play for a team until I was in my early teens, actually. But
That's crazy.
yeah, not what was it?
Really?
I didn't play. Yeah, I didn't play that much of organized football. I think I only played organized football for about 2 or 3 years. I didn't play that much organized football for some reason. But yeah, like in terms of watching football, I've always been there. And my mom would tell you, people that are close to me, I always used to just soak up the knowledge, just soak up the facts. But yeah, I mean, football for me was just something I've always been able to emotionally like just pour into.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think kind of like being 6 or 7 is when football I started to really become engrossed in it.
Yeah. I'm even just thinking back to I'm thinking back to St. Joseph's primary days when football was everything for everyone. You know what I mean? So even like obviously you talk about when you were younger and you're just watching the game, you're not really engrossed in tactics or anything. But then we got to that point where we got a bit older, we started understanding a little bit more. We're following transfers, we're following teams, we're looking at formations and all of that stuff. Not necessarily massively tactical, but then you had things like match attacks. People are trying to create the best team. Trading the cards and all. I remember that so vividly, man.
Bro, one of my favorite things about childhood is something I look back on with like a bit of sadness as well. Bro, you know the way football boots don't hit the same?
No. I hear it.
Like football boots don't hit the same. I remember I used to keep up to date. Like I could tell you all the Puma boots. I could tell you all the Nike boots. I could tell you all the Adidas boots. I could tell you when the next one was coming out. I could tell you like the different colorways and stuff.
You've even been looking at leaks for, the ones that are coming out like next year or something like that.
Literally, even the, what's it called? The Nike ID. In computer time in primary school, I'd be doing the Nike ID, creating my own boots, have the Nigeria flag and everything, boots that I'd never get. But I think that's quite a common experience for football our age. And then even at that age, you start not really anything deep tactical, but you start talking about CDMs and cams. I think FIFA kind of has a lot of the game series has a lot of influence on how a lot of us, saw the game as we were very young. But even actually watching the game, obviously the general kind of consensus right now, not consensus, but the general conversation right now is that football of nowadays is less, what's the word? Less enjoyable, less, what's it called? The players don't do as much skills. The wingers don't take on their man. They feel like, and a lot of people blame Pep Guardiola for that. A lot of people blame Pep Guardiola for that he doesn't allow players to have that certain freedom, but then he's winning all the trophies. So all other managers are trying to follow him. So like, what do you think? Is it really that football is just not as fun nowadays, or is there other kind of context that needs to be applied?
I think it's a thing of there are different eras, I don't know, whatever way people like to pronounce it, and there's different kind of stages, right? So if obviously we weren't, it was before our time that, Johan Cruyff kind of reinvented football by himself. He had loads of great ideas that as a footballer and also as a coach that kind of redefined the way that people played football from like, from mid 20th century even up into the early 21st century. So football definitely looked very different at that point to maybe when Cruyff was growing up and watching football or starting to play football as a young child. So I just think it's the same thing, but because we haven't, like, it's obviously the first time that we've been through it for us, we might not fully appreciate that. But then even for older football fans, I can understand why they would say that, oh, maybe it's not as interesting. It's not like wingers have lost their flair, as you said, and things like that. Things are kind of more methodical, that, slow build up, keep possession, that nothing, like sometimes it gets really boring. Sometimes matches where both teams are doing the same thing gets really cagey. Maybe you could argue that there are less upsets, but then at the same time, that one is debatable in itself. But I can understand the argument that football is maybe slightly more boring. But I just think it's a thing of people have new ideas, new methods to win, and they're implementing them, and what works is what is being constantly, just used over and over and over again. And there is going to come another time where somebody after Pep is going to have a very strong influence on football and change the way that the game is right now. So I just think it's a thing of it's going to keep happening, basically. That's the way I see it.
I agree with that. And even just to expand on that a little bit, like obviously in the past couple of years now, I've read, one or two football books. And I read this particular one on tactics. It was called Inverting the Pyramid, but I can't remember the author's name. But football tends to be a bit cyclical. Is that the word in economics? Like a cycle,
yeah.
like a cycle. And I read through that book, and it was weird how like tactics over a long time can be so similar, but like it will. How do I explain it? Like, okay, so coming back to like today's football now, obviously the big thing is your inverted fullback, your juego de posición, your what's it called? Your inverted wingers, your playing out from the back, this and that, this and that. I personally feel like in not completely, but I feel like in certain little niche areas, football will kind of revert back to some of the things that it's not what's the word, that it's not using nowadays, because I feel like it'll be a thing where everybody's trying to do the same thing. So now managers are looking for that next little bit, like especially at the top of the game. It's like a little tiny margin that you use to to like get an advantage. I feel like a manager might just go and look like, I don't need an inverted fullback. How about my fullback goes up and down the wings, and you'll act like it's some like amazing idea, like he came up with it by himself. But that was the bane of football for like 30 years. Your fullback that goes up and down the wing, But then at that point, it'll be something different that exploits the rigidities of the game. Yeah. So I feel like it'll be a bit cyclical in some aspects, where some things, like even for example, Pep starting the whole like 4 center back thing. Meanwhile, Pep was one of the main guys that did the whole inverted fullback thing. Your fullback that doesn't really defend, that more like goes into midfield to dictate the play. Yeah. All of a sudden, he now puts center backs at fullback. So all of a sudden, now your defenders are more defensive oriented. But that's not a new idea. That back in the day, like
fullbacks weren't extra attackers.
Yeah, literally all your defenders were defenders in the word. So I feel like something similar to that, where in certain aspects of the game, it will revert back to the way it used to be. I think the main thing for that as well is the number 10.
Yeah.
The way the number 10's just gone. I feel like there will be a place for that in the coming years.
Oh, no, definitely. Because the way I even see it, right, I don't see, like, say when KDB was injured and Julian Alvarez was starting instead of him, and obviously that was a different system. They weren't playing with like 2 strikers. It wasn't like 2 wingers and 2 strikers. Alvarez was basically playing as a false 9 behind a 9. But like in my opinion, he was basically a 10 because he was basically allowed to roam all over the place. The same way, well, it's not the same because KDB plays a little bit deeper, but given that kind of like free roam around that area to get into the pockets the way that KDB normally does, it's not explicitly a 10 the way that we would have seen a traditional 10 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it's definitely making space for the comeback of that in a tactical sense. Basically, that's the way I see it anyways.
Yeah, man. I have to agree. I think that's another thing as well. I think the 10 will definitely come back. I think it's coming back in in a little bit. Like, I mean, would you say Odegaard's not a 10? Wouldn't you say you'd say probably like somewhere in between an 8 and a 10?
Yeah,
Somewhere in
yeah.
between an 8 and a 10. But but I think the 10 they will come back because it will just be a thing where it can never be exactly the same as it once was. Because back in the day you had space for players who wouldn't track back. Guys like Ozil. I don't know if you know Riquelme.
Yeah,
Riquelme, Ozil, those guys, guys that you would just let them do their thing. You'd say, oh, why did they have to defend, man? Like when they do all that attacking stuff. But what the main reason that tens fell out of favor is that doesn't run anymore. Everybody has to defend. I think even again, coming back to the whole cyclical nature of football and stuff, is that not total football? The way like in the best teams, everyone defends, everyone attacks. You know what I'm saying? That's total football.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So I think, as we grow, when we're engrossed in the changes, you think that it's like an insane change. But then if you take a step back and look at it from kind of like a macro point of view, you see that a lot of the same ideas are just being reused again and again and again by different managers.
But see, it's a thing where, as you kind of touched on, that it never comes back the same way.
The exact same way,
it's little tweaks. So nobody can fully reinvent the wheel, but they're gonna add this, they're gonna add that. They're gonna incorporate maybe this current playing style with a little bit of something from the past. Yeah, that's. I think in the long run will keep football interesting, but it may be mundane and kind of just difficult to get through from a entertainment point of view in the interim. That's what I think.
I think as well. I think a key factor in that as well because it's something. It's a point that someone made to me about Saka, and it stuck with me quite a bit because me. I'm when it comes to Saka, like I'm very like don't say anything about Saka, but this thing was so true that I actually couldn't dispute it a second. Saka. You understand what I'm saying? Saka looks like someone that's been in the academy his whole life. And it's not to take away from him, but like, back in the day now, like football, if history of football is a working class sport. So like all the, this academy, like this, like crazy academy culture is in terms of the whole history of football, it's quite recent. So, you used to have players, you play on the street. They would play on the street, all them Brazilian guys of yesteryear, Garrincha, Pele, all those guys, they would play on the street. And then how they played on the street would be the exact same way they play in the game. Yeah. And yeah, there were academies back those days, but like they kind of let them do their thing. You know what I'm saying? But like nowadays, like the best players, the players that you're seeing make it to the top, they've been in academies from 6 years old, and when you're in an academy, even directly or indirectly, you're being taught the way of playing that the first team plays, obviously with adjustments, because like you can't expect a 6-year-old to do what a professional footballer does. But from that age, they're already being what's the word, molded to play a certain way. Even the guys that don't make it, like you're talking like the League 2, League 1 guys, majority of those guys are coming from like Premier League Championship academies. So it might be that, because so many players are now academy ballers these days, that so many of them play the same, especially if you look within a league, because like a lot of the times the national FA gets a directive to, make all the players, all the teams try and play the same way, especially in the academies.
Yeah, so that actually just reminds me of something that my manager. I don't know if I would call him a coach or a manager. He's manager of my football team basically. I don't know if you've ever listened to this. Maybe I'll put him onto this episode next time I see him. But basically, when he was doing his assessments for his UEFA A license, and unfortunately, the most recent one he did, he failed. But in my opinion, he failed for doing the opposite of what you basically talked about just there about the FA putting out this directive of this is what we teach the academy ballers. You know what I mean? Where, there's a certain type of way they want to see, or there's a certain type of pattern they see in the kind of like the first teams playing all their games in the highest divisions and all of that stuff. And that's what they want to teach to 9, 10, 11, 12 year olds, and then all the way up to 17, 18, 19, 20 year olds where we're playing now. And it's like that isn't realistic because different managers have different opinions, different managers have slightly different tactics. They're not going to all teach the exact same thing. Even if they do, they're not all going to play the exact same thing. And obviously that's him showing them what he does with his team realistically rather than showing them what they want him to do, if that makes sense.
And I mean, looking at that, I mean, there's two perspectives to look at that from. Obviously, generally in football, that has worked, like the directives, because when you look at national team success, if you look at if you go through national team success, so if we go back to Argentina was Messi and Ancelotti. Then France was just like so much overwhelming talent that they could only win. You know what I'm saying? Germany and Spain are the ones I want to look at, especially Spain.
Yeah.
Spain is the one where you look at, you see, wasn't like half the starting 11 in the final from Barcelona. I think something along those lines. So like when all the players know they're familiar with each other, they're familiar with each other, familiar with the way of playing.
Yes.
It transmits to the national team. And honestly, even coming back to before we touch on Germany, coming back to the present day, I think it's working for England. And I think it's why England are going to win a major tournament this decade. Because if you see it now, Leah, a lot of these players, they've played with each other from the 16s, the 17s, the 18s, the 19s.
In the England setup.
In the England setup.
Exactly how to play.
So even if they go to different clubs and they're playing different ways in different clubs, when they now come to the international setup, they can just adjust. They know how to play with each other. They know the fundamentals of how the national manager is going to play. So I think that yes, that is a positive for the FA director side. But then looking at the game as a whole on a wider spectrum, it takes out a bit of the fun of the game. Because yeah, the fun of the game is, sometimes a Pep struggling against a Sam Allardyce, or like even yesterday, at the time of recording, Mikel Arteta struggling against Unai Emery. That's the fun of the game, the different tactics, the different philosophies going against each other. Or arguably the greatest managerial rivalry of all time, Mourinho versus Pep. At that could be like, that's literally polar opposites of how to look at football, how to play a football, optimism versus pragmatism, So it's different ways to look at it. You can say that, yes, it's a positive for maybe individual national teams. That's something that Germany did as well off the back of, a couple poor tournaments in the late 90s. They kind of got the academies together and said, yeah, you guys all have to play the same way. And, that did help Germany. I think they made the semi-finals of the World Cup in 2006, final of the Euros in 2008, semi-finals of the World Cup 2010, semi-final of the Euros 2012. They won the World Cup in 2014, and the semi-finals of the Euros in 2016. That is that's a decade of semi-finals or less in major tournaments.
Yeah.
So you can't say that it doesn't work. It's just that in terms of like enjoyment of the game, I feel like that's probably a key aspect of why the game kind of seems so similar these days. Even I don't know if you've seen the video. There was a video a few days ago of Arsenal academy players, and people were saying that this could literally be Declan Rice, Smith Rowe, Odegaard, and Saka. I don't know if you've seen the video, but especially the guy that they said was Saka. So you can see that players are being taught, similar ways.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, when we look at it, as you said, from a macro point of view, just football as a whole, say football as a whole today versus what it was when we were younger, when we were growing up, obviously still growing up, but kind of we're now at a stage where we can pick apart different aspects of the game. Obviously a lot has changed as we've kind of gone through there. A lot is changing. A lot will still change. I know we didn't touch too much on rules. The whole thing with goal line technology not coming in until
2014, I think.
Yeah, World Cup 2014, and Frank Lampard was like, it's 4 years too late.
What I'm saying, or even one of the main things right now is that getting the ball is no longer good enough. It has to be a safe tackle.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying.
And it's kind of that also is at times removing from the entertainment enjoyment of the game. That before, you challenge for the ball, you get the ball. Doesn't matter what happens next. Now, in serious cases, we've seen, the rules being subjective rather than objective when somebody has seriously hurt someone. But where every little thing is now being brought under a microscope because the letter of the law says this, and that, which it didn't say 10 years ago because there was no need for it, or they thought there was no need for it. Now they do think there's a need for it, We could talk about, rules in football and how they've evolved and how they've changed and how we may not like some of them for a very long time.
Even one that actually just springs to mind. How they changed the handball. Basically when we were young, I'm sure everyone around my age can relate to this, my age and older. When we were young, we were playing football in the park or at school or whatever. If it hits your hand accidentally, ball to hand. Everyone can relate to this. Ball to hand. Guys will be saying handball. You'll be like, come on, that's ball to hand. Like, I couldn't move my hand out the way. Bro, in football today, there's no more ball to hand. If your hand's away from your body and the ball hits your hand, it is a penalty. It is a free kick. It is whatever it is. If it's on the line, it is a red card. So that's another major rule that I honestly I don't like that. I actually really don't like that because a lot of the time it takes away from the common sense of the game. Like, having played football, having had a decent experience of football, it's not as black and white as they make it seem. Sometimes when you're doing something, sometimes it is your natural position for your hand to be out.
Yeah.
Like they make it seem like a player thinks about putting his hand out and handballs it. That's never what it is. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, and even the whole thing of the subjectivity of a red card in a maybe last man situation with maybe whether it's a handball or did he make a genuine play for the ball or did he stop a clear goal scoring opportunity, all of these things, when you look at them, it's like, I think the one that I've seen most recently that kind of brought those things to my mind was, I can't remember the guy's name. I don't want to say a name that is not, but Leicester centre-back that had a very good game against Chelsea and got sent off near the end for
the red card.
Last man challenge.
I don't remember what his name is, but I remember it was a complete accident.
Yeah,
I remember it.
So
Wait,
my thing was, okay, he's made a play for the ball and he's the last man. I don't believe he's stopped a clear goal scoring opportunity. Therefore, it's a yellow card. But it wasn't even a penalty. Like, it was a free kick, and he got sent off. So that was my issue. That I'm like, that's not a red card.
That it changed the whole game as well because
It did.
Leicester
they had momentum.
Yeah, Leicester just equalized and they were in the ascendancy.
Exactly.
Just looking at it now, I think who got the red card, it was Callum Doyle. Yeah, like, even going back, this even reminds me, I don't know if you remember the David Luiz one against Wolves for us, just like 3 years ago. Basically, like, a guy's in through on goal now. David Luiz doesn't do anything. He doesn't
Stands
actually.
his ground.
Yeah, no, not stands his ground. Like he's running behind him,
Okay.
so he's chasing him, but he doesn't do anything. He doesn't try to make a challenge. He doesn't try to do anything. The guy that's running kicks the back of his leg. Sorry, kicks the front. So imagine someone's running in front of me now, and they kick you, but then in the letter of the law, they've been obstructed by you, and he got sent off.
Yeah, that there is where subjectivity in the sense of common sense needs to be brought in. That David Luiz hasn't done anything. It's the same as him standing in the box. My man tips the ball past him, runs straight into him, and you give a penalty. Doesn't make sense.
Literally, I think common sense has to come back. I think the main thing in terms of like the rules to kind of bring it back to some of the positives that we used to have, not trying to say we're not trying to become the guys that say everything back in our day was everything was perfect, but like there does need to be a bit of common sense brought back into the game. And I think that was a big positive from at time of recording last week. Guys were trying to say that Brian should have got a penalty for that. Everyone that said that should get a penalty for that, let's be honest, if that was your team and you got a penalty given against you for that, you'd be absolutely livid. Like, let's be honest, it's good that the referee, it was stupid. Like, he shouldn't have picked the ball up, but like, what a penalty is a 0.78 xG goal scoring opportunity. For those of you not familiar with the technology, that is a 78% chance of scoring. That's not a proportional punishment to give for something like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's a bit of the common sense, in the game as well.
I think just before we kind of wrap up the episode, we might touch very briefly. Obviously, we'll touch more in depth probably next episode because I'd say we have 6 games left to go in the Premier League title race. So obviously Saturday afternoon, City Luton 5-1 win for City. Helps the goal difference a lot and was 3 points. Very positive display from them going into this week, which they have Champions League second leg with Real Madrid tomorrow, as at the time of recording, and FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea on Saturday. But in context of the title race, obviously, yesterday being Sunday, again at the time of recording, today is Monday the 15th. Liverpool shock 1-0 loss to Crystal Palace at Anfield. They haven't been doing too great. Last 3 games they've not won, which is interesting. But that puts them back down to third. 71 points, 41 goal difference. Arsenal 2-0 loss to Aston Villa there yesterday at home as well. Another not expected performance. That leaves them also on 71 points.
With 49 goal difference.
With 49 goal difference. And City are on top of the table, 73 points, 44 goal difference. We've seen this happen with City in particular at this point of the season, where they go top, they stay top, and they run away with it. So for some people, me not being one of those people, as much as I'm a City fan, I'm also a realistic football viewer. This title race is not over, but Liverpool and Arsenal have been very wasteful, and in 7 or 8 weeks' time may look back to this weekend and say this is when the title was basically lost.
Yeah, 100%. Even as an Arsenal fan, yesterday was a very disappointing result. Wasn't happy with it at all, especially off the back, because I watched the entire Liverpool game and then I watched the entire Arsenal game. So off the back of Liverpool dropping points, that was a huge opportunity for us to proper take control of the title race. To be top outright on points. And yeah, the players, we had a good first half. Tactically, but the second half we got absolutely outplayed. You can't complain. When Emery did a number on Arteta yesterday, we couldn't play, we couldn't keep control, possession of the ball. Aston Villa had good passages of play, and yeah, a fully deserved loss over the whole game. And now that puts City in pole position with 6 games to go. Yeah, this is just a position we never wanted to see City in, because as much as the title race is not over, you would expect City to win it from here.
Yeah, it also, I guess, it puts pressure on City now, where it's not we're not in a position where we need these to drop points and we need to be consistent so that we can take control. It's we now have control and it is now ours to lose. Whereas it was, you would say, Arsenal's to lose at one point or Liverpool's to lose at one point. It is now City's to lose, and basically in the 11th hour, where a few little, another maybe one slip up from both Arsenal and Liverpool, and City could wrap up the title before final day, even though, as we have said in previous episodes, we did really expect it to go down to final day. It may still go down to final day because a lot can happen in these next 6 matches, but you do fear. I don't fear, but
You fear for Arsenal
the
and Liverpool.
neutrals and then the Arsenal and Liverpool supporters do fear that this might be City all over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll just wrap up the title discussion there. So, yeah, we're coming to the end of the episode now. As usual, thank you guys for all the support, especially if you reached the end of the episode. If you just watch for the faith portion, or if you watch both, your support is appreciated either way. We have all our social media in the bio as usual. We have our link tree, which keeps all of them in a nice little one page for you. Or if you just want to go individual, there's the YouTube, and then there's the Instagram, where we don't have any content on the Instagram, but you can see all of our links from the Instagram as well. Yeah, I mean, thank you guys for the support as always, and I'll let Fuego take us out.
Yeah, I echo what Tan said there. Thank you guys so much for all the support. We appreciate it a lot, more than you know. And yeah, we will see you guys in the next episode.